bike is about a 1921 Model K Henderson, 4-cylinder, about 1300 cc's. Really impressive bike actually, for its day. Okay. Why sidecars? Why are sidecars? Well, there's a reason why sidecars existed and why they don't exist today. The main reason being when men came back from World War I and World War II and they'd been dispatch riders and they would come back and buy a motorcycle because they liked riding, and then they'd have a family and they'd put a sidecar on so they could carry the family around. And also, they probably couldn't afford a car. That's the reason, because good cars are hard to get a hold of, and basically in a lot of places, certainly in England and America, sidecars became popular. There's no reason to own one now unless you're racing or competing on one, like doing sidecar trials, sidecar motocross, road racing sidecars. There's absolutely no reason to own one. You'd be better off going out and buying a little station wagon if you want to carry stuff around on your bike. So, who buys sidecars? Well, motorcycle enthusiasts who have big collections and they've got a spare bike that they want to put something on, or they just buy a sidecar because they want one. They had one years ago, they want another one, blah, blah, blah. I don't get it. As soon as you put a third wheel on a motorcycle, it's not a motorcycle anymore, it's a little car. So you've got all the car problems, which means you can't split lanes. There's this thing hanging up the side that's a big target for everybody to run into, basically. Also, if you're riding a vintage bike with a sidecar on, they add a heap of weight to the bike, and you can't stop them, and they just dull your performance because they're so heavy. Especially if it's a vintage chair and it's got an iron chassis and terrible idea. It adds a ton of weight to the bike, basically, and it stops them from going and stops them from stopping properly. So there's a really good reason not to have one. Also, even, and I'll explain some of this in my setup video, but they never put the front wheel far enough forward for a sidecar to operate properly. And they head shake terribly, meaning the bars do all this when you're riding down the road, when you back off. And they're really dangerous. They'll tip over. I mean, unless you're going around a right-hand turn, the sidecar wheel will lift. The advice I always give to people if they've never ridden a sidecar and they've bought one, I always say, if you think you're going into a corner too fast, you are going into a corner too fast, because you can feel it straight away if you're going in too fast. It will just lift. The sidecar wheel will lift, and if you're really unlucky, you'll hit the ground and the bike will land on top of you, which is a not uncommon thing, especially in the dirt. People fart around in the dirt on them and they just flick them off, flick the rider off, and it's the three wheels thing. They don't operate properly. It's nearly impossible to make anything with three wheels handle properly unless you put the front wheel a long way in front of the other wheels. So there are plenty of trikes running around with that setup, and yeah, they do handle okay. But a trike is very different to a sidecar. The best setup of a three-wheeler is with the two wheels at the front, like a Can-Am. They do handle fairly well, and they're less prone to tip over because all the forces are, when you're braking or cornering, all the forces push the bike forward. So when you've got the two wheels at the front to stabilise it in front of you, it makes it a lot safer. But getting back to sidecars, there's a lot to know about the setup on them. As I said, there's no reason to own one. Don't get one. They're a pain in the fucking ass. You'll have it for a few months, then you'll get rid of it. I unfortunately know a lot about setting them up, so I've seen a lot of them. I don't understand it. I really don't get it. I ride them around the block and I go, okay, that handles better than it did. Here you go, mate. Here's your bike back. Well, it's not a bike, it's a car. So you've got, it combines all the elements. The exposure to the weather of a motorcycle and the lack of manoeuvrability of a car. Whoopee. I hope you enjoy this presentation. Good morning. I'm working on this R60/2 sidecar. This is a late one, probably about 68 or something. It's one of the last 2 years of production of these bikes. Okay, it's got a Stibe S350 on it, which is a lightweight sidecar, but with a ton of accessories and it's got a big Hosk tank, like a 40-litre Hosk tank, and I'll show you that on the bike later. Very impressive, very German. All handmade. I've worked on 4 of these. Not one of them was the same as the other. So, that. Now, I'm setting up this sidecar for the guy because when I saw it first, if you can imagine, the sidecar was tipping out that way, right? It was towing out. So, it has to tow in slightly. All right. So how you do that, you do a bunch of chalk lines. I'm very lucky on this bike because it's got square tyres on it. What am I doing? It's got square tyres on it, and it's and you can line the square tyres up with the chalk mark. So you do a long line on the ground that goes all the way the length of the bike and out the other side, so you can check the toe in. And you're sort of straight, but you line up that front wheel with the middle of that. Obviously the steering can move, and that not only affects its alignment, but actually the tilt on the wheel because of this angle, which is called the rake. The angle that this attaches to the bike is called the rake. Now this is an Earl's front end, and for sidecar use, you've got 2 mounting points for the front swing arm. Hello, Scamp, yes. Yes, all right, I'll throw the ball. There you go. You've got two mounts. This is a rear one for solo work. This is a front one for sidecar work, and that pushes the front wheel forward, because for optimum handling on any 3-wheel vehicle, you want the front wheel to be as far forward as you possibly can. That really works. It makes them handle a lot better in corners and not tend to sort of load up and try to tip over. Okay, so knowing we've got a line there, so we've got a line front to back all the way through and out either side. As you can see there's our chalk line. Okay, so then what you do is you park the bike on it, and you get a plumb bob. And if you don't know what a plumb bob is, I've got one right here. And what you do is you get this little devil, which is on a piece of string. And you probably think this isn't very accurate, but it really is. It works very, very well. Now, oh God, I can't do poetry. Okay, so what you do is you hold that up to the axle, middle of the axle. Bikes move forward slightly. But at any rate, you hold that up to the axle and you get a mark on the ground. You can see where I've marked that arrow for my center. Now, I did all this yesterday, so this isn't quite as it should be. I had the bike parked right on it yesterday. Then you do the same on the other side with the axle. You can see the axle there that goes through the wheel. You get that center, okay, with the plumb bob. And then you get a big square out, like a big builder's square, and you do a line perpendicular to this one that goes from over here, across here, through there, and to the other side. And the reason why you do this and line up the rear axle is because for a sidecar setup, if you look carefully, you'll see that the sidecar axle here is further forward than the rear axle on the bike. And it should be. A good sidecar setup should have that. It can be zero, right? But the heavier the car, and these are a lightweight chair, but they're still made of steel. They were a lightweight chair in 1950, you know? And now what limits you here is basically what brackets you've got to attach it with, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I ended up here with about about 155. Okay, now it's just over 6 inches, and for a light chair like this, that's absolutely fine. Oh, there I am in the guard. It's the hall of mirrors. Right, and you just do that the same way with the plumb bob. You hang it down the middle of this, and you get your reading on the ground. You chalk mark on the ground. All this is done with welding chalk, engineer's chalk, whatever you want to call it. So that's your offset. That's actually called your lead. That's called your lead measurement. Now the next thing you need to do is get the sidecar as level in both planes as you can, meaning forward to back and side to side. Let's see what we've got here. We've got a nice digital doodah here. Yep, negative 0.05. So that's 5/10 of a mil, or 5/100 of a mil, I should say. That's very, very close. Okay, that's excellent. Now, like I said, you see these brackets. Now you can see I've torn one of these up and welded it. I actually cut it down because it was hanging like 3 inches off. What I cut off at 120, so a lot. I cut an awful lot off it, and it was absolutely useless where it was. You can see that I've got it cut on an angle. I've got it mounted on an angle. It's slightly tipped forward this way, right? It should be as parallel as possible, but no, it's slightly tipped forward because that was the only way I could get the measurements I needed and the towing I needed, because to move the towing on the bike, you need to move that bracket across and the sidecar in towards the bike. And what I mean by towing is, you see this big bar that I've got set up against the wheel. Well, you set that up every time so that it's sitting on the wheel. Sorry, you set that up every time so it's sitting nice and snugly on the wheel, sitting on a couple of bits of wood. You measure at the back, and you get a measurement. And whatever measurement you measure at the front has to be about 20 mil less. And that means the sidecar wheel, so that the sidecar wheel is pushed in slightly. That helps the handling, makes everything feel better. He's got that fucking thing on crooked. The guy that built this bike was a fucking knob. I've had to fix so much stuff on it. He shorted out all the wiring. I had to rewire the whole bike, put another ignition system on there. He'd blown up his bloody charging system, and oh dear. Anyway, I'll stop fucking complaining. They're the basics of sidecar setup, and there are other things. The bike and sidecar should, you see how that was negative 0.05. There should be just an imperceptible lean out from each other, right? That they should imperceptibly lean out from each other, so that when someone jumps in the chair and someone jumps in the bike, they level out, because everything in the middle there will move as you're riding, right, or as you put load on it. And he's got these giant high bars on it that were which are good because you've got that giant tank on it. They won't foul it. Also, they're extraordinarily wide, and even with the wheel pushed forward to its maximum there, to its sidecar setting, there's only 2 settings, this will be a handful. It also has a hydraulic damper which I have to fit. It's sitting around here somewhere waiting to be fitted, and instead of having a rose joint here, he just put this big washer on there and left the shock bolt loose so it would turn. Another big fucking no-no. You don't do that, because eventually your shock bolt will just fall. So you've got it's turning, it's spinning, and it's got a load on it from the a constant load on it from the damper, which is a hydraulic damper. Much better than the old friction damper, which you can see under there. I think you can see it. Yeah, you see this. Where is it? It's set up in here. That's a plate with 2 friction plates, like clutches. That as you tighten it up, it just tightens up against the plate, which bolts to the frame, and it doesn't work. Basically, it doesn't do a goddamn thing. It can stop them from waving about a lot, but nothing beats a good hydraulic damper. And the damper we normally use is off a VW car, a Bug. The steering damper on a Bug fits on them and will do the job if you set it up properly. So yeah, that's the basics. That's the basics of sidecar setup. There's also a bunch of wiring to do on the sidecar. I finished all the wiring on the bike, and I've got a plug hanging out there to plug into the sidecar if everyone wants to take it off. That's a little electrical plug there that I set up. It's just hanging out there, but it'll be hidden once it's all together. So yeah, a bit of sidecar knowledge there for anyone that wants it.